Good morning. Hello. I'm back, and I'm back for another episode of An Amber a Day, the Functional Nutrition Podcast. This is season 3. Welcome to season 3. I'm hoping you can't hear. I tested the microphone a few times, but let me know if you can. I am on my walking pad right now. I'm walking on my treadmill because, why not? I have it. I got to use the thing. And I work from home, obviously. Here I am recording this podcast. So I thought, what better way to use it than to walk while I talk? And actually, I think this is going to help me with my flow a bit because I tend to be, just really come up with some real gems while I'm on my evening walks. So I'm hoping it translates now as I'm talking to you guys. But hello, welcome back. Today, what we're going to be talking about are superfoods for PCOS. So specifically, foods that have functional health benefits for PCOS, meaning that they have been studied in PCOS for specific outcomes, been found to be helpful, or they are foods that we know help certain processes that struggle in PCOS. So we're going to talk about those and how you can include them in your diet and why you should, and some of the ways I like to do it to give you some ideas. So hopefully you will find this podcast interesting. But before we do that, I'm going to just kind of update you guys on everything that's going on with me, as I like to do. So the biggest thing that's going on is I am obviously a walking queen now. I'm really trying to get more activity in my life. If you've been following my personal journey on Instagram, you know that this is something that I have PCOS as well, if you didn't know. Sometimes people don't know that, but I have PCOS as well. And so I struggle with a lot of these issues, particularly with just getting the amount of activity that my body needs. I find that since I have gone into menopause, since my hysterectomy a couple of years ago, I am more insulin resistant now. My body definitely doesn't process carbohydrates the way it did before. And I'm noticing that, and that's a bummer because I've had a really good rhythm going before that, but we're adjusting, we're learning. And like I've said before, I'm dealing with menopause early. So when you get there, I'll have all the tips. I'll already be an expert on it. So that's what's up with me. The other thing that's up with me, I guess, is that we're getting great feedback on the PCOS Foundations course. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out yet and you want some straightforward advice, definitely a lot more straightforward than the podcasts are, less rambly. You would really like that. I'm very proud of the PCOS Foundations course. I'm proud of functional PCOS too, but I think PCOS Foundations really captures a need for a lot of people, which is I'm newer to this whole PCOS nutrition thing, or I'm not really interested in knowing every nook and cranny of the science behind every single little thing. I just kind of want somebody to tell me, here's how you can eat. I want somebody to give me a baseline place to start from that I know is healthy, that I know is evidence-based, that I know is designed by somebody who has experience in this field, who has good education in this field. I just want somebody to do that for me. And then, I want to get started with the basics and we'll move on from there, right? So PCOS Foundations is my attempt to do that. I'm very proud of that course. I worked really hard on it, and I just feel like it really captures, that the salient information, the need to know information without overwhelming you with too much stuff, but it's also not nothing. So I've had some feedback from people, some messages where people have said, I expected going into this to get a couple, an hour of videos, or, just some short videos and PDFs and the little meal plan, because I'm only charging $49 for it. So I think people assume, just given what else is available out there on the market, that it's not going to be too comprehensive, right? It's just going to be a little thing. And the feedback that I've gotten is that people are very surprised how much is included. They're like, wow, I can't believe how much content you put in here. And if you know me, that's my style. That's the people pleaser in me. But also, like, I just, when I start talking about PCOS, I just get like, I can't stop, as you know. I mean, that's part of the reason why I have this podcast, right? If I start talking about PCOS in one respect, I don't want to give you partial information. I want to give you the whole sum of the information, because I feel like some of these topics are complicated. And if we dumb them down too much, then it leads to confusion. So, you know, if I start talking about insulin, I can't talk about insulin without talking about inflammation. If I talk about inflammation, I can't talk about inflammation without talking about gut health. So it's a good overview of all the things that you need to know with PCOS. But unlike functional PCOS, which is my other course, it's not gonna like overwhelm you. I think it's cheap. I mean, $49 not cheap for everybody. For most people, it's pretty budget friendly. Comes with a meal plan. It's got, I don't know, am I selling it well, guys? I'm proud of it. I just really think everyone that's taken it so far that I've heard from has had positive things to say about it, has been really impressed with it, and has just felt like it was, that they were really glad that they bought it. And it's kind of like my gift, I guess, to the PCOS community. I can't give it out for free at this point in my life, but I tried to make it as budget friendly as I could. Anyways, okay, that's enough selling you my course. I just feel like it's a great investment if that's something that you're needing. So let's talk about superfoods, shall we? What do I mean by superfoods? I know superfoods is a really hokey word. Okay, so let me start off by saying that, like, sometimes I have to use the language, just because that's what people respond to. And if my goal is to be helpful, it's to get it out to the vast majority of people. Plus, also, like, I think superfoods, the word has been co-opted in a negative way, but it actually has a really positive meaning. And what I mean when I'm talking about superfoods are, another way to call them would be functional foods. So these are foods that have specific health benefits for a specific health condition. These are foods where if you go search on PubMed, you can find like spearmint tea, PCOS. You can use those two keywords. You don't have to make a lot of leaps to create a connection. Sometimes making a leap to create a connection is a good thing. I think maybe we should do a little bit more of that in our current medical system. But these are foods where there's been enough scientific sort of interest in them that there's some movement there that people are saying, okay, this has direct health benefits for PCOS, for a certain issue in PCOS. So that's what I mean when I talk about superfoods. I'm going to share, if you're watching this on YouTube, hi, I'm going to share the graphic that I made to kind of go along with this. And if you're just listening to this, I will talk through it. So let me share my screen and show you. You're going to have a little behind the scenes of Amber's work. You can see my my Canva here. It's where I design everything. So superfoods for PCOS. There are 9 that I like to talk about, and they all kind of cover different things, but there's a lot of overlap too. So the first one is cinnamon. Cinnamon is actually really great for blood sugar balance. So if you deal with insulin resistance with your PCOS, which most of us do, you might benefit from some cinnamon. This cinnamon can be helpful for bringing blood sugar down too. So if you are like more on the pre-diabetic spectrum, or you deal with high blood sugars and not just like the up and down roller coaster, cinnamon is actually really good for that. Now there's 2 different kinds of cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon and cassia cinnamon. You'll hear a lot of people on the internet say that you need to use Ceylon cinnamon because it's the only one that actually works for blood sugar. And that's actually not true. If anybody has any research they can point me to that actually says that, please send it my way. But from my research that I've done, there doesn't seem to be any real salient difference between the 2 types of cinnamon for how your body responds to them. Now, there would be a difference if, say, you were buying like a super cheap brand of cinnamon that maybe had like fillers or binders in it that was kind of reducing some of the potency. And I think as well, you want to make sure that anything that you're using as a superfood, you're kind of using it with almost like you would a supplement. So you want to make sure it's the highest quality that you can afford. because cross-contamination with anything that's really potent is a problem. So, organic would be ideal, right? Or something that's been heavy metal tested. You can always use Consumer Reports to test different brands of things, and they test for heavy metal contamination of different stuff. Matcha powders is a good one to look into, and all that stuff. But you want to buy the highest quality you can afford. It doesn't seem to matter which type. They both work for blood sugar balance. Some people find that one causes like some stomach issues for them. Actually, people are always telling me in comments, they're like, Ceylon cinnamon's better for your stomach, and cassia cinnamon. So cassia cinnamon would be like the typical kind of cinnamon you'd buy at the store. That's what most cinnamon is. And then Ceylon cinnamon is kind of like, they usually have it at the store too, but it's not the main type, right? So people are always like, Ceylon cinnamon's better for your stomach. And I won't deny that, like, there are probably people who that's true for, but from the research that I've read, it's actually the opposite, that people often say that Ceylon cinnamon causes more gut distress than just your typical like regular cinnamon. So take from that what you will. I would say give both a shot, see how they both do, especially if it's something that you plan to incorporate every day. The dose that's been studied for insulin sensitivity is 1.5 teaspoons a day. Now, with anything that's dealing with insulin, your blood sugar and insulin responses are happening all day long, right? So having 1.5 teaspoons at breakfast is not going to do as much for you as having half a teaspoon at breakfast, half a teaspoon at lunch, half a teaspoon at dinner, something like that. So the more you can spread them out, the better. On the other hand, the point is not to overwhelm yourself by trying to incorporate every single one of these every single day. The point is more to like find ones that you're already interested in, or that you're curious about, or that sound good to you, and incorporate them regularly. So with cinnamon, a lot of us would eat cinnamon maybe with desserts that we might make, or with breakfast. Maybe we would put it with oatmeal. Some people like to put it in coffee. There are different ways to incorporate it, but typically it's with something sweeter rather than something more savory. Not always. It's good on sweet potatoes. You would benefit more by spreading it out throughout the day. So consider that. Probably the best studied medicinal plant, I guess, for PCOS would be spearmint. Tons of studies on spearmint tea and PCOS. The dose is typically 2 cups a day, and I recommend getting an organic spearmint tea. Now, here's my thing with spearmint. A lot of people don't realize this. I'm a big gardener, and hold on. I know you're like, ugh, eye roll, but hold on, because everyone assumes, especially if you live in an apartment or a small house or in a city, or all you have is like a kitchen window, you don't even have a balcony, whatever. Everyone assumes that live plants are going to be outside the realm of possibility for them. But spearmint, any of the mints actually, are considered almost like a weed. They grow like crazy. Like when you plant them outdoors, a lot of people plant them in the ground in a pot because they spread so bad. They take over, they're invasive. My point with that is they're extremely easy to grow. They grow really well on a windowsill. They grow really well in a pot. They grow really well on a balcony. Anywhere that gets even a mild amount of sun. Like, honestly, they could grow in the shade. Like, they'll be a little leggy and ugly, but they'll grow. You can also get a little, like on Amazon, you can find like $20 little grow lights that you could, put on a set timer, and it'll put a grow light on it for 12 hours a day or whatever. Spearmint tea, to buy it as a tea, you can find it, but I find that a lot of people, especially if they don't live in the US, it's hard for them to find it. And then also it's expensive. It adds up, especially if you're trying to drink 2 cups a day. So I make my own. I just grow spearmint in a pot in my backyard. The thing never dies. It freezes, and then you think it's dead, and the next year, what do you know? It comes back. It's a perennial. So you can't kill it, so you might as well work with it. And so I grow my own. It's really easy to brew it from fresh leaves. You just kind of like take off a clump and steep it in hot water for maybe like, I like to steep it a little bit longer when it's fresh, and I like to kind of like squeeze it and muddle it a little bit so that the juices come out a bit better. But like 5 to 10 minutes is usually about how long I do. And then, you know, you can make spearmint tea that way. Now you can also get the tea bags, and you can get loose leaf spearmint tea. No, peppermint tea is not the same thing. Now, is peppermint tea great for you? Yeah, it's great for your gut. Very helpful if you get stomach aches or you get like nervous stomach. It's good for nausea, good for a lot of things. So I like to have peppermint around too. But the only studies on PCOS have been done on spearmint tea, not peppermint. So do with that what you will. The benefit of spearmint for PCOS is it's really effective for reducing the testosterone that causes facial hair and sometimes hair loss. So if you are dealing with androgenic issues, so high testosterone, or you're having the symptoms of high testosterone, because remember, I talked about testosterone before, in that even if your blood work says your testosterone is normal, if you're having facial hair, that's a sign that you've got high testosterone. There are different types of testosterone in your body, and not all of them are tested on lab work. So if you've got the facial hair, spearmint can be really helpful for that. Hair loss is a little bit more complicated, but if you know that your hair loss is like androgenic alopecia, or it's coming specifically from high androgens, then spearmint tea would likely be pretty effective for that spearmint. The next one is matcha. And this is my personal fave. I drink a matcha latte every day. The benefits, I mean, better skin. Definitely has helped my skin. It's a powerful antioxidant. So anything in your body, any symptoms in your body that are caused by oxidative stress, so things like chronic inflammation, things like skin issues, things like even sometimes like body fat in the stomach, even insulin resistance or like stress issues can be inflammatory. So there's a lot of different ways that something that's a powerful antioxidant can work. I love to take NAC and acetylcysteine, which is a supplement that I highly recommend for PCOS. I'll link to it in the show notes. That's a really powerful precursor to the body's master antioxidant, which is called glutathione. But matcha is a great food-based antioxidant. It helps with all that kind of stuff. And we often get really caught up in thinking about our blood sugar with PCOS. And yes, imbalanced blood sugar can create oxidative damage, but there's an inflammatory component to PCOS that's not driven by blood sugar issues that is worth addressing. I find that it's often gut health based, but it's also just like there's a certain oxidative stress that's happening in the body. And this is the case particularly too if you are working on fertility, like if you need to improve your egg quality, or heck, sperm quality in men, matcha can be helpful for that. It also is kind of an appetite suppressant. It helps your body produce GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that reduces anxiety. So if you deal with anxiety, a lot of people find that other forms of caffeine kind of trigger their anxiety, but matcha doesn't. I know that's the case for me. Like, now if I have too much of it, then sure, like anytime I go really heavy on the caffeine, I'm going to get anxiety. But just my daily matcha latte that I have in the morning never increases my anxiety. It actually makes me feel calm, makes me feel really balanced. The caffeine is released really slowly. Am I making you want a matcha yet? If you don't like the taste, go on my Instagram. I have several posts specifically on how to make matcha taste better, all that kind of stuff. Ensure you're drinking a good quality brand of matcha. So I really like Aprika Life. I've actually been drinking their matcha since way before I had an affiliate code for them. I actually asked them if I could have an affiliate code because I was like, I'm talking about you guys all the time. Can you give me a little kickback? And so they said yes. Anyway, so I have a link to them, and there's a coupon code too. I'll put that in the description box as well. If you need a good matcha brand to start with, they're a good brand, I think, to start with. I recommend their culinary grade matcha rather than their ceremonial grade matcha if you're doing it in lattes. So what they've taught me is that culinary grade matcha has a better flavor profile when it's mixed with other stuff. The flavor comes out more, whereas ceremonial grade is better on its own. It's a little smoother. But I agree, like I've tried it both ways. I've bought their ceremonial grade, I've had other ceremonial grade matchas, and then I've had their culinary matcha, and I like the flavor of it in lattes better. So do with that what you will. There are also tons of other great brands. There are other people, if you go search on TikTok for like matcha reviews, there are people who really go down the rabbit hole with matcha. And I'll admit that I'm starting to kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit, but I definitely wouldn't consider myself like a super expert on matcha specifically. I just know I like the taste, the flavor of this brand. I like that they're double organic certified in Japan and the United States. Matcha is something that you definitely want to buy organic. And yeah, just really like it. So I do that every day. 1 to 3 teaspoons a day is kind of the general recommendation. And all matcha is powdered green tea. So I often get asked, like, can I do green tea instead? I don't like matcha. Yes, you can do green tea instead, and you'll get many of the same benefits, but the potency won't be the same. So with green tea, you're taking the tea leaves, you're steeping them in water. And so some of the stuff is seeping out, and then you're drinking that water, right? But with matcha, you're directly, it's almost like I always joke that it's like my morning salad, because I'm basically drinking leaves, right? Like they're powdered up leaves. I'm drinking the whole leaf. So it's definitely got more potency. Whatever you like. I mean, green tea would be a great place to start too, but I think matcha has more of those health benefits. And if you don't do well with the caffeine, there is something called hojicha. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it is a roasted matcha. The same brand has some of that. They sent me some of that last year for Christmas, and it's really good. It's kind of like got a chai flavor, like if you like chai lattes. And so I mix it with cinnamon, another one of your superfoods. I mix it with like some cinnamon and some other like pumpkin spice type stuff, and have it warm, and it's good. But roasting the matcha removes a lot of the caffeine. So it's actually fine to drink for people who don't do well with caffeine, or, in the evenings, whatever. All right. And then we get into about 4 different things that are great for PCOS, but they're great in maybe a slightly more indirect way. So people don't often think of them as specifically PCOS superfoods. These are great for pretty much anybody. I mean, a lot of these foods are great for anybody, right? But specifically, these ones are really good for anyone who has anything going on with their hormone balance at all. So especially if you are dealing with like estrogen dominance type stuff, or anything with like liver, sluggish liver, things like that. So the first one is cruciferous vegetables. And if you don't know what a cruciferous vegetable is, it's a category of vegetables. It includes things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, cabbage. And what cruciferous vegetables have in them is something called indole-3 carbinol, which converts into, and I can never pronounce it, guys. It's a really hard one. It's like dindolylmethane. DIM is what we call it. So DIM is a component of these cruciferous vegetables that helps your body to metabolize and excrete hormones. It's very supportive of the liver health. So to give you a little primer on hormone metabolism, your body makes hormones from a couple of different places, but primarily hormones are made in the ovaries and in the adrenal glands. And you break down hormones into other hormones. So progesterone or pregnenolone gets converted into progesterone, gets converted into testosterone, gets converted into estrogen. That's a real oversimplification. I can show, in the functional PCOS group program, which by the way, by the time this podcast comes out, we might be enrolling for that group program. It's a 12-week group program where you get to meet with me once a week, and there's some one-on-one time, and you get to learn all about PCOS with other PCOS people, and it's a really fun time. So if you're interested in that, I'll probably have some information for that in the description box as well. And we go over hormones in a little bit more depth there. I show them this chart of the breakdown of all the different hormones, different pathways that they can take as they break down, kind of depending on what your body needs, or also certain conditions can direct the hormones to break down in more positive ways or more negative ways. A lot of times with PCOS, we follow more negative pathways, inflammation, insulin resistance, things like that can sort of trigger that stuff too. Long story short, you make hormones from other hormones. And so when you have too much of, let's say, testosterone, like we often do in PCOS, as that converts out, it can convert into different types of estrogen. And there's the good type of estrogen, estradiol. We all want a lot of estradiol. And your estradiol levels probably look great. I mean, usually in PCOS, it looks pretty normal on paper. The problem is that estradiol is not the only type of estrogen, just like testosterone is not the only type of testosterone. And there are different pathways that your estrogen can convert into that can be more dangerous. And this is one reason why in PCOS, we're at higher risk of endometrial cancer, because we tend to have more issues with endometrial hyperplasia, which is a thickening of the uterine lining that's driven by some of this hormone conversion. It's also driven by too low of progesterone relative to the estrogens in our system. So my point with this is that it's common in PCOS to have estrogen dominance, or to favor estrogen over other hormones. We often think of PCOS as being purely a overload of testosterone issue, but if you understand that testosterone converts into estrogens, and that there are certain things about the PCOS body that might, or the PCOS diet, pre you working on nutrition, but let's say if you eat excess sugar or things like that, it can preferentially sort of convert testosterones that way. It's called aromatization. Anyway, I know I'm getting in the weeds a little bit. What I'm trying to tell you is estrogen dominance is common in PCOS for a number of issues. And one of the big ones is that when we make hormone, we then have to excrete it. So when we're done with hormones, we're supposed to get rid of them. And what happens in PCOS is we often struggle to eliminate hormones. So we have issues with our liver being sluggish or being overwhelmed. Sometimes we have genetic mutations in our certain parts of our detoxification processes. Our liver is our main detox organ. And so sometimes we have issues with fully metabolizing and excreting hormones. Gut health issues can also contribute to this. And then there's the preliminary factor of just the fact that if we don't ovulate as much, we don't make as much testosterone, we don't make as much progesterone, so we don't get the balance that we need. So this overload of hormones that happens in PCOS drives a lot of other issues in PCOS. And one way that we can help is by not just trying to stop the tap or the flow of all these extra hormones, which we absolutely should, right? A lot of the recommendations, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about in these superfoods are aimed at reducing the conversions of things, or reducing the amount of testosterone in the first place, right? And that's the main crux of a PCOS diet, is to kind of reduce the amount of hormones that we're making in the first place so that we're not overwhelmed with them. But we can also support our body by supporting its detoxification processes. So supporting it to get rid of old hormones, basically. And cruciferous vegetables do a great job of that. They help bind things up, get it out of the system. They're supportive of liver health, et cetera, et cetera. So cruciferous veggies are something that whenever I'm working with somebody who has heavy periods, painful periods, PMS, endometriosis, PCOS, any issues with where we know they've got low progesterone, anything where they seem over estrogenized or over androgenized, cruciferous veggies can be very, very helpful when included regularly. And the thing about them is you got to include them regularly to really see the benefits. So I usually will ask my clients to try to include a serving every day at least. Like that's, I think, a good goal to aim for. A lot of people like cauliflower, or they like broccoli, or they like cabbage or Brussels sprouts. If you don't like any of those foods, I recommend trying them roasted or like coated in some olive oil and then put them under the broiler, let them get a little bit crispy. That can make them a little bit easier to tolerate. And you can try things like, I love to make cauliflower mac and cheese, which it's not mac and cheese, but it's cauliflower, but it's good though. Like, it's like, I used to love to eat broccoli covered in cheese when I was a kid. So cauliflower covered in cheese. Hey, anything covered in cheese is good. So don't be afraid to, do things like that. Do things to make your food taste better, experiment with that, because including these regularly is really helpful. If all else fails, you can always blend them into a smoothie, and you usually don't taste them in there, including things like cauliflower. I blend that into smoothies all the time, kale, that kind of stuff. But cruciferous veggies help your body metabolize hormones, not just estrogens, but also testosterone. DIM is something that's really helpful for bringing down testosterone. So there are supplements that can help with this. And if hormone metabolism issues are a really big problem for you, sometimes just eating enough cruciferous veggies just kind of doesn't do enough. Like, it's helpful, but sometimes we need a little bit of supplement support, which is fine, So there's some stuff that I recommend for that. We go over that in like the group program, and in my course, Functional PCOS, I talk about that a lot. I can't go into too much depth on here, but that information is available out there if you search for it. But yeah, we want to eat a lot of cruciferous veggies, 1 cup a day. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. The next thing would be seeds. And these do some similar issues because fiber is a binder. It helps your body make sex hormone binding globulin, which helps to bind to testosterone and prevent it from being converted. Prevents it from being converted into dihydrotestosterone, which is the more potent form of testosterone that kind of causes facial hair and stuff. It's also really good for your gut health, and all that stuff feeds like helping your body break down, metabolize hormones better. So I like to aim for about 35 grams of fiber a day. That's hard to do. If you've ever, like, sometimes I recommend just getting a tracking app like MyFitnessPal or whatever, and just track everything you eat for a couple of days. And oftentimes in my private practice, like when I'm working with a new client, I'll ask them, what are some things that you eat regularly? Like, tell me what you ate yesterday, or, what's a typical day look like for you? And this is so I can get a sense of what foods they eat regularly, how much protein they're eating, how much fiber they're eating, what the ratio, like the macronutrient ratio composition of their meals probably looks like. And that helps a lot because in PCOS, all that fiber is really important, but most people don't get enough fiber. Just in general, we usually don't get enough. And especially for PCOS, where we often kind of would benefit from even more than like what's typically recommended, we usually don't get enough. So if you've ever sat down and tracked out what you eat for a few days and just seen how much fiber you typically eat, you'd probably be surprised. Most people are like sitting around maybe 10. If they're really healthy eaters, maybe they're getting closer to 20. But you actually have to try, I think, to get enough fiber. To get that 35 grams, you really have to try. So seeds, nuts, legumes, all really good sources of fiber that help to get you to that goal a lot easier. But seeds are my favorite. They don't really impact your blood sugar, great source of fiber. great for your gut, and I just find that they're easy to add to stuff. Like you can add chia seeds to oatmeal, to a smoothie. They're very versatile. They can be thrown on top of stuff. You kind of don't notice that they're there. Pumpkin seeds, which is another specific superfood for PCOS, are a great source of, zinc. They also help to reduce facial hair in PCOS. So, and they're easy to add on top of a salad, sunflower seeds, all that kind of stuff. It's really easy to add, especially if you're needing more fiber. So I highly recommend thinking about that. Some people ask me when it comes to fiber if they can do psyllium husk, and I'm not opposed to psyllium husk. The thing is, it's always better to get your fiber from whole food sources. And whole psyllium husk, of course, it is technically a whole food, but you're having it as a powder, is separate from the rest of your meals. And I find that sometimes we bridge the gap when what we ought to be doing is just improving the quality or the versatility of the meals that we're already eating. So let's say we're eating a pretty fiber poor meal, right? And then we're adding some psyllium husk on the side. Technically, the macros are right. Technically, we're getting enough fiber. But is it going to be as beneficial for your body as if you had the vast range of nutrients that would have come if you had had some berries and some seeds and some nuts and these different things that not only do they have fiber, but they have other health properties, So if you need some psyllium to bridge the gap, let's say you're working on liking vegetables maybe, or you're working on your lack of diversity in your diet, but you're not quite there yet and you need something to bridge the gap, that's fine. But try to get it from whole foods first, and I think you'll get more health benefits that way. Leafy greens, again, something that everyone should be eating. Good source of folate. Folate is really helpful. It's a B vitamin. It's really helpful, supportive of your liver as well, and really helpful for hormone balance in general. It's another one of those things that oftentimes people don't get enough of in their diet. In PCOS, we tend to have lower levels of folate, so we need to hyper focus on this a little bit more. A lot of this stuff, especially like these three here, are really easy to add into a smoothie. So if you're up for like a daily smoothie, even if it's just like a small one that you have for a snack, a little bit of protein powder, a little bit of cruciferous veg, or a leafy green to get your folate, spinach is a good source, some seeds, some berries. Berries are another great source of fiber. Blend that up, and you get a lot of this stuff out of the way. You're eating it in more whole foods form, because even though it's blended, you're still getting all of the fiber. It's not the same thing as having like juice, which would eliminate a lot of the fiber. So I still consider smoothies a whole food. So you're getting all of this stuff, and you're getting in a small package where it doesn't require too much thought, right? So I highly recommend. And those things are helpful for everybody. Another thing that's helpful for everybody is fish, and specifically this helps PCOS by lowering inflammation levels. We know that PCOS we call it an inflammatory condition, and there's a level of chronic inflammation that's present in most of us with PCOS. So eating enough omega-3 fatty acids from fish, particularly salmon, is a great source, is really helpful for calming inflammation in the body, can be helpful for hormone balance. And it also helps with insulin resistance too. So I really am a big fan of fish. I like to have people eat fish regularly. If you don't tolerate fish, if you're allergic, obviously stay away. But if you just don't like it, maybe think about, if you can't push yourself to maybe to try to like it, or to find other ways to cook it to see if maybe you might like it in a different way. You could do like a fish oil, but you're never going to get the same benefits from a fish oil that you would from actually eating whole fish. So keep that in mind. But the omega-3s are also really important for your brain health, and that helps with your mental health as well, your concentration, your focus, things like that. So it has a lot of benefits outside of just being anti-inflammatory and helpful for PCOS. So definitely highly recommend. And then dark chocolate. This is the fun one. Everyone's like, oh, I like that. Dark chocolate, preferably like 80% dark. You can work your way there if you need to, but it's a really good source of magnesium. And oftentimes in PCOS, we're low on magnesium, we're low on zinc, we're low on other minerals. So dark chocolate, it tends to be pretty satisfying for people. It's a healthy fat, and gives you some magnesium. It's a nice way to end your day, kind of satisfies a sweet craving without like really bumping your blood sugar too much. I just think it's a really good dessert option to have for like, if you are the type of person who just has to have a dessert every day. Number one, that could be some imbalanced blood sugar issues, or it could be too much restriction earlier in the day, not enough protein. There could be a lot of things going on. Or, maybe you're just the type of person who needs to have a range of flavors to feel fully satisfied. Nothing wrong with that. I'm actually that type of person myself. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, I am dealing with some insulin issues that are a little bit worse right now than they've been in a while. So I'm starting to have, I'm having more sugar cravings and things like that. And it's frustrating trying to get that under control. So I have a lot of sympathy for if you're going through that. But dark chocolate's a great way to kind of like stave off more cravings. If you tell yourself, after dinner each night, I let myself have a quarter of a bar of really good quality dark chocolate, it can really satisfy that craving. And you're still getting health benefits. It's good for you. It's also a really good source of antioxidants, resveratrol. So it's good for you. So I like dark chocolate. Other things you could do for magnesium, there's a powder called Natural Calm that I really like. And I often make myself a little drink at night with the Natural Calm powder just to get me some magnesium. Magnesium is kind of a muscle relaxant. And it's also, so it kind of makes you feel sleepy, relaxed. So it's nice to take it in the evening. It does have a bit of a, it stimulates motility. So basically it can give you diarrhea if you have too much of it. So work your way up. A lot of people make this mistake. I remember one time I had a client who she was just racking her brain trying to figure out why was she having horrible gas at night and like loose stools every morning. And she's like, so, it must be something I'm eating at dinner, but it's different every night. Like I can't figure it out. Can't figure out what's going on. And we were really trying to figure it out. I'm like, is it something that she's eating, or is it something that she's drinking, or is she, is it maybe a supplement that she's taking or something? So we went through a list of her supplements, and she had fairly recently started a new supplement. And it was a magnesium supplement. And I said, that's it right there. Because what happens is your body can tolerate magnesium to a certain point, but once it gets more than it needs, it flushes the rest out. A lot of vitamins are like this, actually. Not all. Some vitamins, fat soluble vitamins, your body stores, but water soluble vitamins your body flushes. So things like vitamin C, for example, would be similar. If you have too much vitamin C, your body will flush. Too many B vitamins, your body will flush. Anyway, magnesium, too much magnesium, it's got a laxative effect. And so she was taking too much at night, and she was, basically like taking a laxative every night. So anyway, for what it's worth, every time I tell that story, somebody's like, oh my God, that's me. I've been having this crazy gas at night and I can't figure out what it is. If you're taking a magnesium supplement, you might be taking too much. Or always be aware, if you're taking multiple types of supplements, that a lot of them will include magnesium. And so if you're taking a magnesium supplement on top of a multivitamin that already has magnesium, you might be doing a little bit too much. You will get used to and tolerate more as time goes on. So the Natural Calm powder is nice because you can titrate your dose. You can just like work your way up. But dark chocolate, again, a great source and delicious. Those are the 9 superfoods that I recommend for PCOS. I go into more depth on the superfoods and how to actually incorporate them how I would recommend adding them, things like that in both my courses. So you can check those out if you're interested in going a little bit deeper on that. But I hope that this was helpful and taught you something today. Don't forget to submit your questions. I would love to answer them. And yeah, thank you for being here for another episode. I'll talk to you guys soon.